Welcome to the Boneyard. This is a podcast about Mythgard. This is episode 1, the Phantom Beta. My name is Flake. I will be your host, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Markthius.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Flake. And this is the debut episode of the Boneyard. And we want to start the show by thanking our sponsors, Team Rankstar and Inked Gaming, and of course, all of you wonderful listeners for making this podcast even possible.
Yes, and today's episode, we will tackle the end of Mythgard's alpha stage. We'll have some discussions about color and color identity, and go through some of our own favorite decks to play moving into the upcoming beta.
Absolutely, and we'll also be welcoming our first guest to the show. He is the newly minted community manager for Mythgard, straight from Rhino Games himself, Leo. And we'll be chatting with Leo about some of the burning questions of the future of Mythgard and answering questions from you, the Mythgard community.
Now that you're all set up, let's just play the music and enter the Boneyard. All right, again, this is the first episode of the Boneyard, so you probably don't know necessarily who myself or who Mark are. My name is Flake. I have been involved with CCGs for 20 years now. And I mean, my experience stretches from Lord of the Rings, Pokemon, Star Wars, Hearthstone, Magic, Gwent. I mean, it kind of goes all over the place. And now Mythgard. And I am really, really enjoying this game. So I figured, you know what? Why not have a little podcast about something you like? Mark, tell them where you're from.
I have been in the community for 21 years. No, I'm just kidding. I've also been playing CCGs for a very long time. Got started in Hearthstone many moons ago, competitive Hearthstone, moved on to Gwent, and then got into Magic, and then here I am with Mythgard. Flake and I both members of Rankstar as well, and I think we were both enthralled by how great this game was, even for the first... I remember the first week you and I both started playing, it was just like, wow, this game is like... It's only an alpha? That was so shocking to us.
That's part of it. I mean, I know you're the one who introduced it to me, and I remember that you would play it on stream occasionally, and I'd kind of have you on the sidebar while I'm sort of doing other thing, and I was just watching it. And what's interesting about Mythgard is the fact that you can kind of pick up more or less the basic mechanics of the game. I mean, if you're a CCG player like Magic or Hearthstone or whatnot, you can kind of, just by looking at the board, you're like, all right, that's the health total. This is the board. These are what creatures do. These are the numbers associated. There's not much new to the game. But what it does, in my opinion, is it takes a lot of the best elements from various different games, be it the mana mechanics, the lane mechanics, the creature mechanics, etc., and kind of weeds out some of the issues with them and fixes them. And what you have left is a pretty clean card game that we call Mythgard. And yeah, Mark, so you're the one who introduced it to myself. So I guess you're the elder statesman amongst the two of us when it comes to it.
Yeah,
you are the pro.
I mean, I'm still learning. I'm still like, getting into it and learning all the ins and outs. But I think what grabbed my attention first was that it was a completely brand new thing that wasn't based on any other game that already existed. You know, Hearthstone is based on World of Warcraft, and Gwent's based on The Witcher, and Magic. Well, Magic is its own thing as well. But I think Mythgard it just grabbed me with like, this is such a unique story, and the tutorial, which is the first chapter of the story, was also pretty interesting. And the mechanics of like, I kind of describe it. Somebody asked me, what is this game like? It's like, it's kind of all the card games you've already played put together into one game. Is how it feels. You know, it's got like lanes, it's got land, kinda. It's got a mana system. You know, it's like all put together.
And what's interesting about this game is that, like you said, it kind of distills away a little bit of the problematic aspects of games. For instance, the colors and the color mechanics regarding the game, be it as a mana system, burning cards. There's no land system. There's no automatically generating mana. The economy of how you sort of evaluate your cards and how you plan out your turns is very, very, very vital to your path to success. And that's one thing that I really, really enjoyed it. And Mythgard right now has been in alpha for, I don't know exact dates, and this is something that's on me for not knowing this.
It's almost a year, I believe. I believe it's like almost a year, if I remember correctly.
It's been around for longer than you think. The exclusivity of playing it, however, has sort of only recently been expanding. But I mean, they're finally ready to drop into beta, and being new to the game and immediately appreciating the gameplay, but also recognizing, like you said, the elements of the game, like the lanes, the mana system, etc. I mean, it kind of borrows a lot of elements from other games, but tears away and weeds out some of the problematic aspects. For instance, I mean, land system in Magic is always going to be something that, well, it's brutal when it doesn't work out for you, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that you'll have to live with. It's a kind of a hindrance on both sides, because you're both going to have to suffer through the same problems. But I know how you feel when it comes down to getting land screwed or land flooded.
Oh, it's the worst.
In this case, I mean, the colors and the color identity of the game, you're sort of having to figure out how you're going to plan your turns out by burning cards going forward. And one thing that I'm very much pleased with this game is that collection is not necessarily going to equate to success. And I don't know what your experience is with this, Mark, but I found that if you're playing if you're playing smarter and playing more synergistically and planned out and more methodically than your opponent, then collection is rarely going to factor into your wins. Obviously, if your opponent is playing, if you're playing just commons and your opponent is playing has a full collection, it's going to be a tougher road to success. But
sure.
I mean, what has your experience been in terms of playing against those whales who have, a collection of just mythics and golds,
yeah.
whereas you're trying to sort of snake out a free to play account, hoping to get some victories out with your cheaper cards.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, you could still get, you talk about land screw. I mean, you could still get mana screwed in the sense of if you're playing multiple colors and you never pull the gems that you need for a specific color, you could end up getting screwed in that way. But it's you could play a mono budget color deck and pretty much go toe to toe with someone who's just shoved all these mithril cards or gold cards into their deck, because your deck might have more synergy than theirs. So it's kind of an interesting mechanic where your skill level is actually way more dependent than just, oh, I have bigger cards than you. And that's something that's a little bit different than other card games that rely on RNG or that rely on having larger, rarer cards in order to win.
Yeah, no, strategy is definitely is a bigger factor than, playing against the wallet decks, as they're called, where you're constantly outclassed because very rarely are relevant cards going to be printed in the common or the uncommon slot. Usually it's just pack your deck with as much rare bombs as you can, and then you kind of soldier your way to a victory that way. Yeah. And that's one thing that Mythgard has taught me, is that and I will definitely give credit where credit is due. Someone was in my stream about a week ago or so and just said, you keep complaining about every time your opponent plays a mythic, but you're in a position to win. Like, you can play around these things, you can deal with them. So just stop blaming your losses and your misfortune on expensive cards. Just play the game and do it. And I was like, damn it, he's right. Like, he's absolutely right. And then you come up with some interesting, deck ideas and really effective synergies. And then you just stomp on these people who are just dropping bigger cards, and it makes you feel better. Honestly, I think that there's a real sense of I hate to say this, sense of accomplishment, but when you're playing with a cheaper deck and you just outpilot your opponent, like, that feels good. That's the payoff, man. Yeah. That is absolutely the payoff.
Well, it's, comes down to unit placement, I think, because that's or creature placement. What do we call them? Creatures? Creature placement.
Creatures, minions, units.
This every game has a different one. So, dudes. So it's so important to. I mean, that's when we're talking about how you beat out a deck that's mithril or gold heavy. I mean, if your placement was better than theirs, you set up for success and they didn't, because they thought they were just going to steamroll you and powerhouse you with bigger cards. Like, well, I put blockers in better places. I put attacking in better places. I put my enchantments in better spots. It's so important, and that's I'm even still trying to get used to that mindset and that mechanic. And I think you and I are a little bit used to that when it comes to, because we came from Gwent. Gwent was very important about unit placement as well, and where you put things and how you put things there. The order at which you place them down. So I think we kind of have a little bit of getting used to that mindset. But in this game, it's so much different because there's only one large lane, and it's just a different mindset of where to place things, and it's so important to know where and when to put something down.
That's correct. I mean, planning and establishing your strategy. This is very much a game where you have to think 2, 3, 4 turns ahead, especially
Yeah.
not just from the perspective of where is my opponent going to play? Where do I have a free lane? Is it better to be aggressive? It is better to be defensive, but also in economizing your mana pool and making sure that I need to be able to play a harvester, a 3 yellow card on the proper turn on turn 6. And if I'm not burning these cards, that means I can't play these cards. I have to burn them instead. There's a lot of foresight that you're going to need in order to get to these positions.
Oh yeah, that's the do I burn it now or save it for later question is always tough. I mean, burning a card recycles it back in your deck anyway, but it's still like that big burning question sometimes where you're right on the cusp maybe of being able to play that card in one more turn, but then it's like, oh, but I'm gonna get killed now. So you got to decide: do I burn it now or do I keep holding on to it? And that's always a tough decision. And this game is a little bit brutal when it comes to. I've been punished hard by just simple little mistakes, and that's something that I actually do like though, because that's something I've always complained about with other games is that I can make 10 mistakes and I still won the game. Like that doesn't seem fair. So this is way more punishing for a little mistake, and you might have just screwed yourself for the rest of the game.
Absolutely. And, missing that one point here, that other point there of doing sequencing your moves in the right order is always going to be something that you need to do to optimize every single turn, because it might come down to it where 1 point matters. And, you've won by 1 where you've hung on by 1 life and just had that extra turn to convert a bad situation into a win. And I want to talk real quick, Mark, about colors and color identity. And Mythgard has the luxury or the vast library of cards that spans over 6 different colors. And I want to ask you, Mark, in your experience, have you found that any colors particularly identify to any types of archetype, be it control, aggro, mid-range, more technical, more creature-based? What has been your experience with colors and the identities that they represent?
Sure. Well, the first important thing I think is to know that the color identities also relate to a different myth and pantheon, which is really cool. You have blue, which is Norse, and you have the red, which is like Greek and Roman, and you have I believe green is more like Eastern European and things like that. So it's really cool how each color kind of has that really unique identity that I haven't seen in other games. But yeah, when it comes to what you're saying about what color is aggro, what color is this, they're kind of like all a mix a little bit. I think red you would probably label as your aggro situation, but there's also, a way to be very aggressive when it comes with blue and green. You can also get really aggressive with orange. So like it doesn't just hold it to that. I think if you go with just a mono deck, sure, you're going to have it's going to lean more towards one side. If I went mono red, it's probably going to lean way more towards aggro. If I went to mono yellow, it's probably going to lean more towards control because there's a lot of bigger control units over there. But then if I mix red and yellow together, now I've got more of a mid-range deck going on. So I played a lot of blue and green with K9 cards, and that was a very big ramp deck. So it's really just finding like how I approached it was I know I'm an aggro player and I know which pantheon I like the most, so I kind of just went with that. So I've been rocking like a mono. I've done the mono red thing. Mono red can get a little expensive, but I've been playing a lot of actually currently mono blue with the Valkyries and doing a lot of biker gang stuff. And I also enjoy the blue green with ramping with the K9s.
No, those are significant decks. I faced off against a bunch of them, and like you're saying, you're right. I mean, I don't think that colors necessarily typically exclude archetypes or kind of lean heavily towards one type of archetype. But when you're going to go mono in a particular color, like you said, usually the best cards or the best strategies are going to lean one way or another. You could play mono red to a control style of play. It's absolutely possible. Just like in yellow, you could be aggressive with yellow, but it's not necessarily going to optimize the card options for you. I've noticed that I've had this discussion on stream multiple times playing against red. And you've heard me sort of harp on it a little bit.
You love red.
I very much do not love red. That is not an accurate statement. But I found that red just seems to not suffer in ways that other decks might suffer. For instance, playing against a red deck, they seem to have the life total advantage. They seem to have the board presence advantage. They seem to have the hand size, the card size advantage. And they're putting pressure on your life total. And to me, it's like, what do they not have? And
yeah, they're pretty good.
They're very good. They're very, very good.
Well, it's not just that they're aggressive, but they're also vampires. So they're gaining life while taking yours away very quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. They're giving themselves a cushion as they're sort of pressuring you to react. And if you're playing slower, if you have the misfortune of not exactly having the right cards to start off with, it's going to be to your detriment. But I have sort of slowed down or rather honed down my deck ideas to it started off as, what can I possibly do to just crap on red all the time? So I put in every single potential board clear, small minion removal as I could, and even that wasn't good enough. I needed to sort of put more creatures on the board, more dudes. But
yeah, you can't go creatureless in this, man. You can't go unitless and stuff. Like, that's not a thing in this at all. I think you'd be in real trouble if you try to just play spells.
Oh, no. Like, by no means was I going creatureless.
Okay.
But what I was doing rather was I was creating creatures that were more reactionary.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't have as many big boys as I probably should.
Got to get that Alpha Strike, man. That's the one. That's what beats red. Alpha Strike.
It's key. Also, I found that just layering the deck with like laser grids and maelstroms and spider traps and snake traps, that is enough to make red players go bananas.
Because if every turn ones,
it's so good. Yeah. So I've had a lot of success playing with a blue and yellow deck that plays a lot of lane enchantments and a lot of value off of your cards. Things like I call it the biscuit, but it's the Olama ring, and also the blue artifact that increases the strength. Like it goes +1/+1 when you're occupying an enchantment, which essentially
that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
By the end of the game, my entire board is about 5 to 6 lane enchantments, and just telling my opponent, like, this is going to be uncomfortable for you because I have spider webs and snakes popping out of my ass. Like, it's a whole freaking thing. And every snake that comes out is like a 3/3 or a 4/4. And that to me has been awesome. But in terms of actual color identity, I think that every deck has the option to be relatively, mediocre to okay in all aspects, be it aggro, mid-range, or control. But some colors are always going to be associated with having their bread buttered on one side. For instance, red can play control, but they're always going to be better off at aggro, right?
Sure. But this game seems more friendly to experiment. Like, even though like there's kind of a meta that developed with the alpha here, obviously, and as new cards, they kept, giving out new cards throughout the alpha, and now the core set, I believe, is complete now. But as new cards were introduced, it would shift a little. But I think that what I noticed is it's so easy to experiment in this game because you could just say, well, I got this blue, red, and let's just throw in a splash of purple now and see what happens. And it's like, it's okay to do that, and you're gonna still have a great time even if you lost.
Yeah, no, 100% agree on that. And that's the great part about it, is that when you're playing a game that doesn't necessarily have any deck building restrictions, it allows you to sort of stretch out your imagination to fit things. Because my first rendition of my screw red deck was yellow, red, and blue with as much board clear and small amounts of sort of minion removal as possible. And that wasn't necessarily me trying to make a tier 1 deck. It was me trying to work through my own anxiety of playing against red every goddamn day. So I just made an FU red deck, and we went from there.
See, you should try yellow. Yellow does pretty well against.
I love yellow. Absolutely.
Yeah,
if I was going to identify with one of the colors, it would be yellow or blue. Those are the two that I'm very, very happy with right now. And that's my go-to deck right now is a yellow blue mid-range / control deck that I'm very, very happy with.
Yeah, those are good. And also don't forget the we didn't even mention the balance that you have to do with finding out what is the correct path and the correct power to put into your deck, because those are gonna, like, if you put the wrong, I've had this mistake before, you put the wrong path into your deck and it's actually gonna hinder you from doing what your potential that you could have. You don't always want to play. I know a lot of people like to play the seasons, the 4 seasons or 5 seasons, whatever it is, 4 seasons, 5 seasons. The Four Seasons, like the hotel.
The fifth season is
fifth
value.
season.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I always joke. There's a fifth season in here somewhere. I know there is. But yeah, the Four Seasons one is really popular, I noticed. But that doesn't necessarily work all the time. Like, there's definitely decks where I've seen that one in there. I'm like, that actually is hurting you right now, because once winter rolls around, your board is obliterated. So you maybe shouldn't have put that in here.
I agree, and this is definitely worth a discussion on a future podcast about deck
For
building
sure.
strategy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's so many topics we can get to. It's an endless possibility.
Which is great. And I guess we're going to end it. We're going to sort of steer away now before we get to our first guest. Our first guest, by the way, like Mark mentioned at the top of the show, is Mythgard's very own community manager, Leo. So we have a lot of questions for him about the future of Mythgard, what we can expect in the future, as well as the beta and the community and all that. But we'll get to that soon. Before we get to Leo, Mark, I want to ask you, what are you playing like right now? Like, what is the last types of decks that you've been building? What have you been facing? And what is kind of, I know that you're very much you're a brewer, you're a deck builder. What is kind of on the chopping block for you to tackle?
Yeah, I've kind of been on this thing where I just go, well, what is this tag? And let's just throw every card that exists that has this tag in it. And I've been kind of like on that kick. So I've really enjoyed the Valkyries in the story mode. So and I like the lore of that. I think it's really cool that the Valkyries is a biker gang. So I've been saying, well, let's just throw in all the Valkyrie cards. Yeah, there's Valkyries in almost all the colors. So I did a mono blue Valkyrie deck for a while. I finally got myself the Mythic Valkyries and all that good stuff. So that's really powerful. And then recently I threw a splash of red in there because there's a red Valkyrie that turns into a demon with Alpha Strike, and it's really brutal. So I threw a splash of that in there, and it's so good. It's so good. I have a great time. It's aggressive, but it can also be mid range if you get forced into a long game. It holds its own. So I've been rocking that. So that's been kind of my go-to deck right now.
Yeah, there's some really interesting things, and like you said, a lot of the fun about it is actually discovering it. Like when you're like, "Holy crap, there's a red Valkyrie!" Like, let's. Yeah. All right, we've opened a new door into another opening of Pandora's box. Just all this interesting elements get flooded through when you just introduce a new color to it, right? And
yeah.
And the game having 6 colors gives you so many options. And I mean, I faced off against a 5 and 6 color deck, which was a little tough. Bit. They're interesting because you do not know what to expect. You're like, anything could happen. There's
an enchantment deck that's like that, where it uses all the colors and basically plays almost all the enchantments, and it's just it's a long, you're buckling in for a long match. It's like the Teferi of it's the Nexus.
Oh my lord!
It's the Nexus of Mythgard.
Yeah, but at least you get a turn. That's the beautiful part of it.
Yes,
you eventually get a turn.
Yeah.
What I've been playing, like I said, most recently has been enchantment related kind of mid range to control decks, and yellow and blue specifically. I actually have a shameless plug here, but on my YouTube channel, I do have a deck guide for something that I call Watch Your Step, because there's so many enchantments on the board that really dictate where your opponent can play their minions. So when you take control of the board and funnel things down to where you want them, it's a lot more digestible to deal with, which is what I've been doing. And I mean, my little all-stars have been the Fire Dart Frog and Yahui. Those 2 cards in yellow have been amazing at just keeping the opponent's board uncomfortable at all times, because trading unfavorably with the Yahui or making the decision to sack into a Fire Dart Frog and just taking damage across all 3 lanes has been so good to watch. Is when you drop the frog and pass the turn, and your opponent is like, oh my god, do I move? Do I attack? Do I just take it? What do I do? And that's the kind of game I like to play. It's like, oh, you want to put the pressure on me? Well, the pressure's on you. You make the decisions, mofo. It's not on me anymore.
You did mention laser grid there. So before you mentioned the laser grid, which is good because what happens, like, you play laser grid and they take 1 damage every time they attack through that lane, right? And it blocks. That's 3 lanes. So you probably also like Maelstrom then, because Maelstrom is like the opposite of that, where it's a constant and it deals 1 damage to the other side every end of your turn. The best thing to do is drop Maelstrom and then drop that worm that goes buffs. Oh my goodness, that's such a great combination, because you can't put anything around it, because their side of the board will get damaged if they try to come close to that. So it's like this the Maelstrom becomes this impenetrable force around your large unit. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's the ensnaring serpent or the ensnaring drake. It just essentially freezes your opponent to those particular lanes. What I've been doing, and really really fun to do, is what I put a laser grid on lane 2 and 6, so it's covering the first 3 lanes and the last 3 lanes.
Mhm.
In the middle, I've been putting that spider web that generates the spider, and anything in that middle lane is essentially has death touch. And then I put the snake pit next to the trap, the spider web. So whenever I generate a snake, I move him into the middle row, so he has death touch, or he has a deadly. So it's either you sit and you go through the laser grid, or you bump into a snake that kills you, or the snake will just sack itself into you. It has been an exceptional strategy. And on the last lanes, or on the outer lanes, I have the giant stairway, so I can just put things in those 2 rows, have them giant, enormous, and just start attacking through the edges. It is so hilarious to see when your entire board is just covered with spider webs and laser grids and
you're making
pits.
You're essentially making a maze for your opponent. You're making like an obstacle course for your opponent.
Oh yeah, it's essentially, it was the failed plot for an Indiana Jones movie, but it is so
this is
good.
where I put the ball pit.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a psychopath sort of McDonald's playground, right? There's just, and this is where the spikes come out, and there's a band playing Yankee Doodle Dandy on the side, and it's insane.
This is where we'll put the vertical net that everyone's foot gets stuck in. That's where that's gonna go.
All right, 2 words: trampoline. It's like that's pretty much it. But that's been my experience playing recently, and I know that once we get into beta, I'm probably going to be leaning towards that way again. But new cards, new things, and part of that, Mark, is that we're going to learn about what is on the horizon for Mythgard, because we're going to be talking to none other than Leo, the community manager.
Absolutely.
So I am very excited to get to that. I'm sure everybody else is dying to see what is happening with Mythgard, what the plans are for the future. So this has been the first segment of the Boneyard. And when we come back from our short little break, we will be met with the community manager for Mythgard. That would be Leo. That's on the other side of the break. So our first guest ever on the podcast, on the Boneyard, is none other than the newly minted community manager for Mythgard. This is Leo. Leo, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. So I guess we're going to ask you a few questions. And now this is a very interesting time for Mythgard, because it is coming out of alpha. It is going into a closed beta, and then after that into an open beta, wherein you'll have a massive influx of people. And now you are new to the Rhino team. And I guess the first question that people should know is, what exactly is your role? What is a community manager? What are your duties with Rhino in regards to Mythgard?
So I am the community and marketing manager at Rhino. So I handle managing all their social media, as well as more marketing aspects, such as like AdSense on socials, Twitter, Facebook ads, as well as other marketing efforts.
Okay, and you'll be interacting a lot with the community. For instance, when you say that you're handling their Twitter account, when people are tweeting at the account or replying to some of the posts that are made, that is going to be essentially, for the most part, you who's going to be having that interaction and dealing as more of like a front-facing personality for the game, correct?
For the most part, yes, but the Rhino team is very active with engaging in the community, and everyone has access to the Twitter. So it might not always be me, but for the most part, it will be.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's cool. So like I said, I mean, the card game has been around now for, it's still fresh. It's still new. It's an alpha, right? But it is going to be moving towards a closed beta. But that doesn't mean that it's literally something that has been only on the scene for about a week or two. This is a game that has months and months, almost a year of actual gameplay and community involvement surrounding it, though it has been relatively exclusive. The beta is going to change that. And I want to talk a bit about the meta and moving towards an evolving meta, because we know that when it comes to a card game success, that always revolves around the gameplay mechanics and the cards. And keeping a meta fresh is going to involve new expansions that are going to be released. And I'm just curious to know what Rhino's plans are for Mythgard regarding expansion releases. Are they going to be something that is regularly scheduled? For instance, once every quarter or 3 times a year, so to speak? Or is it something more along the lines of, well, when we have good content, we'll release it to you, but there's no set schedule? What are the intentions or sort of the marching orders for Rhino regarding expansion sets?
So for expansions, we're currently aiming at 2 for year 1. And then after year 1, which starts when open beta starts, then we're looking for ideally 3 a year.
Okay, so that is still, it's a pretty ambitious schedule to say, that we're going to do 3 a year, especially so it pretty much gives a 4-month meta cycle before it gets shaken up. But just curious in terms of solo content as well, beyond just expansions and expansion sets, will there be more solo storyboarded stuff or single player gameplay, for instance, like the puzzles or the campaign and such? Will there be more of those released around the same time in between the expansions? How is that going to work out?
So there definitely will be more solo gameplay. We're huge fans of games like Dream Quest and Slay the Spire, and we have been kind of testing and prototyping some kind of similar roguelike type styles with our game.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no set schedule for those types of releases, and we're still kind of working on what we want to do. And then once we figure out the direction we're going, we're gonna work on getting a schedule to you guys.
Okay, so that's great, and that's one thing that everybody in the community always appreciates, is the fact that you guys are very forthcoming with information. You guys are always accessible and front facing when it comes to answering questions and concerns. And I mean, part of that is the fact that you're here on this show right now talking about it. So that's really, really awesome. Now, another part of this, and it's sort of started to bubble up a little bit here and there independently, but having a robust competitive scene is really important. And when a CCG wants to make an impact on the scene, so to speak, like when Mythgard wants to establish itself as a real player, I'm assuming that it's going to have a pretty good competitive scene moving forward. And you see other games out there that have devoted 7 figures, like million plus in terms of dollars for prize pools. That is a really, really ambitious way to go about it. And I'm not saying that that's something that Mythgard can necessarily do or needs to do. But what is Mythgard's plans in terms of esports and a competitive environment?
So we definitely want esports. I'm personally a huge fan of esports and a competitive environment. I think it kind of drives the game and creates a lot of good community aspects and interactions. Right now, we have plans for both a master tier for players at the in-game or players at the highest level to play on the in-game ladder, and we are currently working to do in-game client tournaments. That is something that is not going to be available with open beta launch, but should be very soon after that we get that out to you guys. In that meantime, we are going to continue supporting community ran tournaments any way we can.
Okay, so that's a great point. Just in itself, the fact that there is going to be a lot of support in game for tournament gameplay. So you're saying that when open beta hits, it's not going to be there just yet, but something that's down the line will be an in-game tournament structure or a mode where you can go ahead and just jump into a tournament as they occur. Is that correct?
Yeah, there should be in-client tournaments that we can run. Say in-client weekend tournaments, for example, not putting anything in stone, but like we could run in-client tournaments with the thing we're building. We could have select community members run tournaments. And we can also have, if you just want to play a tournament with your friends and just want to do it, maybe every week, you can set up an incline tournament with that as well.
So a big aspect of a game developer is its relationship to the community, and even more specifically with content creators. And the relationship often comes from, a side of the content creators will produce content, but they'll also help with balances and feedback, etc., and things along those lines. Sort of helping with the direction of the game. And now that the game is entering its beta, can you talk a bit about the relationship that Rhino has had with the community up till now and moving forward? I saw that you guys just sort of launched a partnership program, and maybe you guys can talk about that partnership program and what Rhino is going to be doing to include the community and how its relationship with the content creators and streamers is going to be moving forward.
Okay, yeah. So Rhino's stance on community involvement is pretty much as we can do given time constraints. Every Rhino dev is extremely active on our Discord. Uh, if something gets posted in general, in feedback and bugs, and pretty much any of the channels on our Discord, at least one Rhino dev will read it within like a couple hours. So please know that like all your feedback is being read, no matter where you post it or when you post it. But for going forward for content creators specifically, we launched our partner program, as you said. It's just starting, but we look forward to having a lot of community involvement with our partners and kind of getting them to be the forefront of the Rhino community. And we're looking to support them uh, initially with free packs right now, exclusive card back and trim, and some promotion, as well as a direct line to the Rhino dev team with a partner only Discord channel, as well as meetings every other week.
Okay, so it's going to be an open dialogue. It's not just a matter of having a cool card back or just a fancy badge to throw on your Twitch stream. There's actually going to be a very open and ongoing discussion that you guys are going to have with this with the partner community. And I mean, that's fantastic. And I just want you to talk a little bit maybe about how the community has shaped the game up until now. I know that it's a lot of it is involved with slight tweaks to cards and balances towards the cards and the numbers and such. But what has the community done up until now, let's say, that has really shaped the direction of the game, moving up till now? And it might not be so much as a drastic change, but I'm sure that they're there, sort of, with a hand on the rudder, steering the ship just a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I don't think I can point out any drastic changes, but definitely card balance is one that we always look for. Feedback suggestions, at least like even if it gets posted like this doesn't feel okay, we definitely go back, take a look at it, and just re-examine card balance. For pretty much every aspect of our game, we kind of take a open approach to feedback, and any feedback that's posted, we take a look at. I mean, even today, there was some feedback about kind of the targeting space and the 2v2 scene. And, it was very easy to just look at that, talk to the dev team, and, kind of decide, okay, this definitely needs to be changed. So we're looking to update kind of the 2v2 UI and layout in the future. And
And
that
for
came
those
directly from Discord.
Oh, and for those who are looking to get involved with the partner program, there are some criteria that you guys list, but I mean, it's a lot of that is merely guideline for the most part, right? I just want you to talk a little bit about who specifically you're looking for, other than the metrics that you list of X amount of followers, etc. What type of person or what type of content creator are you looking for?
We're really just looking for passionate Mythgard players and community members. Uh, like you said, these are guidelines, so you don't necessarily have to hit all the boxes, or it's not as if you hit all the boxes, you're just automatically accepted. Um, but we're looking for any Mythgard content creator that's really passionate about the game. Currently, it is only going to be for Twitch and YouTubers or any really content creators. So on Facebook Live or Mixer, also feel free to apply. Um, but also in the future, it could very well expand to be for people that write guides, people that have a blog, just any exceptional community member that kind of wants to be out there producing any form of content and kind of wants to work with our community team to build something special.
Well, that sounds really good. And I like the inclusiveness of it. Again, the fact that you guys are going to have, open dialogue, ongoing dialogue, and having that channel constantly open where you guys are receiving feedback and just keeping a finger on the pulse of the community. And I'm sure that you guys are going through, tons of these applications as they stand. I know I submitted mine, so my fingers are crossed on that, but I'm very much looking forward to how this shakes out. Honestly, I think that this is a very, very good thing. And for those who are interested, you guys can go check out the partnership program. Just look it up. I'm sure if you're in the Discord, you guys can take a look at it as well and get your applications in for that. So here's a good question. What kind of decks do you typically like to play? I mean, Mark and I usually have a little bit back and forth. He's very much an aggro go face. I'm more of a mid-range control style player.
Very on two separate scales when it comes to playing.
Yeah, I want to know where on the spectrum you are in terms of control versus aggro.
I definitely lean towards aggro.
Yeah.
I enjoy aggro and mid-range. I really do not enjoy playing control. But I also really enjoy playing tribal decks. So
okay,
I would play a bunch of those.
Now there's something that we can definitely get on the same page with, is that I really like to synergize in terms of tribal, and here's all the snakes in the deck and I'm going to make a snake deck, whereas Mark is like no well that's it, and which is great, and there's a lot of it, but a lot of the times Mark and I will have some arguments where he's like, if it's red it's good, that's my rule, and I'm like, god damn it, Mark, that's not how this works. So we usually have this really interesting duality to us where we argue a lot, but I promise you that there's no sitcom on the horizon. But if there was, you would be a recurring guest, Leo. I promise you. You'd definitely be a recurring guest.
That's good.
So the other thing I want to talk to you about is, it's often a prickly point amongst sort of digital card game communities, is the in-game economy and how that's balanced. And I don't think anything can really sour a community's feelings towards a game other than feeling squeezed by a particular developer. And I know that just in the grand scheme of digital CCGs, there's a lot of There's a lot of drama going on with other games because they drop instances of just slight adjustments or announcements regarding the economy. And then, you kind of feel slighted by that company that you've been investing in. And I know that Rhino right now has various different elements of resources, be it essence and gems and the credits, etc. I want to know where Rhino stands as a free-to-play game, how open it is as well to making adjustments based on community feedback, and if you guys are just dead set, is this going to be the in-game economy as it stands with, we've finalized that? I'm just wondering where Rhino stands on that.
As of right now, we're actually pretty happy with the in-game economy. That being said, we're always open for changes. If something needs to be changed or something wants to be changed, nothing's ever set in stone that we can't change it. But we're pretty happy having wild cards, crafting, daily singles, missions, and the weekly chests to get quite a lot of free-to-play aspects into the game. Another thing that the community might not know is almost the entire team plays the live game as free-to-play. So that kind of gets us, or lets us have the perspective of is this free-to-play friendly? If you're playing free-to-play, how bad does this feel to get a certain aspect or to be able to make a competitive deck?
That's a really interesting perspective as well. And it's worth noting again is that you guys are playing free-to-play accounts. So having that firsthand experience of the random Johnny that joins the game and decides that he doesn't want to spend a single dime on it and see how far they can go. And there are other games out there on the grand the grand scale of things of what is very free to play friendly versus not free to play friendly. And one aspect of Mythgard that I'm very happy about is that I myself, I only bought the starter pack, and the rest has been just grinding regularly. And after about a week to a week and a half, I was able to build a deck that I'm very happy with. And also realizing that despite the fact that I might get outgunned in terms of mythics, rares, etc., like getting outgunned on terms of collection does not necessarily beat you in terms of skill or understanding of a game. So learning your deck will always trump playing someone who is playing with a wallet deck, So that's really awesome. And I guess the next question is, who's the best Mythgard player on Rhino?
Oh, to be honest, I don't actually know that answer.
You could say yourself, honestly, that would be really awesome. And we won't post that on Reddit at all.
Definitely not me. Give me a week or two and I'll be there. But I've been I haven't had too much time to play. I'm just kind of still getting settled into all my job duties, and then coming for all your ladder points.
Oh, okay. The gauntlet has been thrown down. Leo is coming to steal, not just coming to Mr. Steal Your MMR is what we're going to call you from now on. All right, Leo. So we have some questions, like I said, from the community. These are straight off of Reddit, which is where everybody was going. And again, for those who haven't had their question read, or have any future questions regarding the game, we will be, again, reaching out through Reddit and on Discord. And you guys can also tweet at myself, at WatchFlake, or at Markthius if you guys have questions, things you want to see, or questions that you'd like asked. Nonetheless, this one comes from Malvas on Reddit, and he says, Dead Man's Eyes is currently the most RNG card in the game, being a literal coin flip fiesta. Does Rhino plan to change that card or make more cards like it? So, and I guess the follow-up question from me is, what's Rhino's views on RNG in this particular card game? More or less the same? How are we going to go about
it? We might tweak Dead Man's Eyes, but there's no plans to remove the RNG aspect out of it. The plan is to have between 1 to 4 RNG based cards per set. We never want the meta to be dominated by RNG, but we don't feel like RNG is in itself a problem.
Okay, but having, there are certain games out there that legitimately sort of thrive off RNG factors, where a solid 33% of the cards have RNG related elements to them, or, around that. A quarter of the cards have some type of RNG element to it. Basically, RNG, you don't want RNG to dictate the wins and losses. You just want them to sort of give advantage where, an advantage can be gained randomly, right?
Yeah, that's about right. And like I said, we're aiming to have like 1 to 4 RNG cards per set, so not even close to the 30% mark.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question from the community. This is from Forgiven12, also from Reddit. And Forgiven asks, what is the biggest quote unquote work in progress feature that will keep Mythgard in beta until that feature is finished? So in other words, what feature do you guys have that's sort of being worked on that will, until that is finished, you can't have a full launch?
There's a lot of things that we would want to get in before we consider Mythgard fully released. But the two biggest things are probably in-client tournaments and guilds. There's a whole lot of quality of life features and polish that would make the game feel more complete. But those two in-client tournaments and guilds are really the ones that we consider need to be done before Mythgard is complete.
All right. And I guess the next question would naturally be, what is sort of the timeline here? Is there an actual timeline for a full game launch? I know this is very ambitious considering we're in alpha and there's still closed beta and open beta to go through. But do you guys have essentially a tentative, is it, Q3 of 2020? Is it Q4 2020? What would be an ideal if everything sort of fell into place the way it should? What are you guys looking at in terms of having a full launch?
The only thing I can say about that is we're definitely looking at a 2020 release. All
right. Well, that's pretty good in itself. I mean, having an open beta start at the, in the later stages of 2019, get the things going. And I'm glad that there is that kind of ambition to get things done and get it on the level right away. And I have one more question. This one from Tenshu, also from Reddit. And we kind of touched upon this before, but he says, will Rhino host tournaments or leave that completely up to the community? Now, I know that you guys want to dip your toes into the esports scene and you are integrating an in-game tournament, but what will be your involvement with community-based tournaments besides saying that there's an in-game tournament client? Will you guys be supporting, in terms of advertising, in terms of talent, in terms of prize support? What is the stretch that you guys can give?
We will definitely have official tournaments ran by the Mythgard team with full support. In addition, we'll have sanctioned third-party tournaments with prize support and user tournaments that they can make at any time for their friends or guildmates.
That sounds amazing. That is a good, healthy thing to hear, especially when, a lot of these card games, it's besides the fact that it's just something you kind of play casually, in your spare time when you have a couple minutes here and there. There's a lot of people who really thrive to have, budding competitive careers. And it's not a stretch to say that these are careers that are within people's grasps. And it's really good to hear that Rhino is on board to not only have their own environment of competitiveness, but to really support the community's efforts as well. So Leo, thank you so much, honestly, for being on this, our first episode of the Boneyard. You have been a very insightful and very eye-opening in terms of the future of the game, and I look forward to talking to you further and seeing how the game develops. So cheers to you, my friend. Is there anything else you want to say? Any big leaks, anything amazing that you could share with us, or are we gonna have to wait like everybody else?
I think you're gonna have to wait. These next 2 weeks are gonna be extremely exciting, and there's gonna be a lot coming, but we're just not quite there yet to start leaking.
That's fine with me. That is fine with me. Mark, anything you want to add, or you want to toss that to Leo before we go?
No, I'm excited for to see an esports scene develop with Mythgard. I know a lot of the community has been asking about that, and I know it's always kind of too soon to tell, but I think that's such an important thing for CCGs this day is to like kind of develop a little bit of an esports scene to kind of get your face out there. So it's exciting to hear that tournaments are being planned.
That is absolutely indeed true. Leo, again, from myself and Mark, thank you very much for appearing on the Boneyard. We will talk to you very, very soon. And you can catch Leo on Discord or via the Mythgard Twitter accounts. If you want to reach out, ask questions, he is available. That is what he does. He is the community manager for Mythgard. Leo, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
And that has been the very first episode 1 of the Boneyard. Mark, it has been a pleasure. I think that this is something that I am very excited to be able to do for on a regular basis, rather.
Absolutely.
And lots of great discussions. There's so much on the horizon that I'm excited to do. But before we get into those topics, those are going to be future topics. We don't want to bust it out all now. But where can we see you, Mark? And give us a little bit of gotcha.
So you can catch my Mythgard content through Team Rankstar, or you can watch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Markthius. I stream about 4 or 3 times a week with Mythgard, and planning on doing some deck guide videos in the future as well. So we're kind of waiting for the beta to kind of roll around so I could get those deck guides rolling. And you could also follow me on Twitter @Markthius, and send me all your questions you want to hear on the next Boneyard episode.
Yeah, that is where you can find Mark. I myself stream live every week at twitch.tv/WatchFlake. You can catch me on Twitter as well @WatchFlake. Send me all your questions, your comments, whatever you have, as well as any ideas that you have for future guests or future content here on the Boneyard. I want to give another big thanks to our sponsors, Inked Gaming and Team Rankstar, and of course to our first guest, Leo from Rhino, the community manager for Mythgard, and of course to our listeners, because without you guys, honestly, we would be just talking to ourselves now, wouldn't we? Now, thank you very much for listening. Mark and I will be back with another episode of the Boneyard in no time at all.